Well, it's time for us to get started tonight. We're glad that you're with us here for our midweek Bible study, and I'm thankful to be able to teach class tonight and going forward for a little bit longer. There we go. Can you hear me now? Let me repeat everything I just said exactly like I said it. No, in all reality, we're thankful you're here. Glad to be able to study God's Word during our midweek Bible study here at the Forest Hill Church of Christ. And we're thankful to be able to assemble together again. The next several weeks that we are able to have regular class in here, we're going to have a series of lessons on what does the Bible say about. And tonight we're going to begin with materialism. Now, I don't think anyone in here struggles with this specific sin to the point where I felt like it was a requirement to cover it, but this is more one of those freshen up lessons, kind of remind ourselves on this topic. And if you were to think about that room in your house that you probably have, like I had when we had a house, and the garage, the attic, whatever it might be, where you just throw your stuff and you eventually say you'll get to it one day, and then one day comes and you realize, I'm too tired to get to it today, and so I'll get to it later. And you and I can look at our own houses and lives and see just how blessed we really are to have so much stuff that we don't at times even know what to do with it. For a lot of people, the concept of a junk drawer is a foreign idea. They don't understand what that means, but if you have one in your house, you know it's where all the stuff that you don't know where to put it, that's where it goes. It goes in that junk drawer. And maybe, just maybe, one day it will be beneficial to you. And we wake up and we find ourselves surrounded by stuff. And sometimes things that didn't seem quite as important all of a sudden became pretty important. I don't know if you remember going to the grocery store back in 2020 and trying to find paper towels and toilet paper, and it was all gone because people went and they hoarded that for themselves, buying as much of it as possible so that they could have it for themselves, and then people who needed it couldn't get it. Lysol, Clorox wipes, all of those kinds of things were also taken. And in fact, you might have seen in some cases people posting them on the Facebook marketplace saying, I've got a bottle of Lysol, $75, and it's yours. And that's illegal, by the way. You're not allowed to do that. But some people still tried, and they were not able to really get any type of traction with that business model. But for the longest time, we would go to the store and we couldn't find some of the essentials that for so often and so many years, you could just bank on it being there. And in fact, now in many cases, you go back to these aisles and you can find not just the brand that you're used to, but all different types and all different sorts. And we think about how blessed we are to live in a country where we just have all of these blessings right at our disposal. And if I were to tell you tonight that I would give you a wad of cash to your favorite store, I bet I could get an answer from most everyone in here about where that store would be, where you'd like to go, and what shopping spree you'd like to have. And I don't remember the name of it, but years ago there was a television program that gave you the opportunity to have unlimited time or an unlimited budget for a small amount of time in any store, and you could run down the aisles and throw as much into the cart as you can. And even today in our society where social media is more of a way to enjoy entertainment, there are some people who on YouTube and others will say, I will give you the ability to put anything within this little box that you can fit. And if you can fit it in there, I'll buy it for you. And then you watch as these people, they go straight for the technology and they go straight for the items that maybe they don't really need, but the guy said he'd buy them anything that would fit in the box, so why not take advantage of it? And if we can't look at our country and see that it is a materialistic country, I think we're fooling ourselves. I think we're not being honest that so many people spend so much of their time focused on getting the next thing. And I've been guilty of that. I love technology. If you spend any time talking to me and you ask me questions about technology, I may not know the answer, but I want to know the answer, and I'd love to talk to someone about it. And so if there's some new gadget that's coming out, boy, I'd like to have that. I can't buy everything that comes out. I can't always buy what's right in front of me, and sometimes I have to learn to say no. But materialism is defined in the dictionary as a tendency to consider material possessions and physical comfort as more important than spiritual values. Things that truly matter we put to the side and we say it's all about my stuff. That's what we really want. And so tonight, as we consider that subject of materialism, I'd like to start by pointing out that materialism in truth is the love of money, or when we say money tonight, you could put wealth, you could put stuff, you could put things, whatever makes you most comfortable, whatever applies to you that you might think is a better word for that, you can put in there, because materialism is really just whatever it is that you become enamored with or can become enamored with. And as we begin our study tonight, I want us to think about the actual purpose of money. My son was sitting in my dad's lap the other night, and my dad said, trying to get the 4-year-old response, "What do you think I should ask from Santa for Christmas this year?" And my son said, "How about a new iPhone?" And my dad just busted out laughing, because to my 4-year-old, iPhone must be free. iPhone doesn't cost any money. It's not an expensive piece of tech. And to him, it's just, if you ask Santa for it, it'll probably show up. And you can get a new iPhone. And for so many of our children, they have no clue what money really is. I can remember growing up, we would go to a movie as a youth group, or we'd go to some restaurant together, and I would be given $20. You know how much change I usually brought back? None. Thank you. That's exactly right. Spend it if you got it. That money would burn a hole in my pocket if I left it in there too much longer. And so if I went to a restaurant, if I went to a movie, I wasn't bringing any change back. And if my dad ever asked for change, I'd say, "Well, I needed to spend it all." I look back on that now and realize, how often did I lie to my dad about how much money I needed to spend where we went? The purpose of money is not to just have it burn a hole in my pocket. The purpose of money is not for me to acquire as much of it as possible despite what everyone else might need. The Bible lays out very clearly that in the first place it's to support. It's to support. It's both to support ourselves financially and to support others that might need it. In the idea of supporting ourselves, if you look at Acts chapter 20 and verses 32 through 34, you find that the Bible says that, "So now, brethren, I commend you to God, and to the word of His grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel. Yes, you yourselves know that these hands have provided for my necessities and for those who are with me." When Paul is talking, and we read in this passage here about the idea of the usage of money, it's for support. It's not to be spent frivolously. It's not to be spent for things that we don't truly need or truly have to have. In our minds, we can say we need a lot of things. It's not for the wants. It's for what is absolutely necessary. And to a 4-year-old, you ask them, an iPhone is necessary. To a younger person, you give them $20 and you say that they can go and spend what they need. In their minds, they need to spend every last drop of that $20 bill that they've been given. But the purpose of money is actually to support ourselves. And in fact, in 1 Timothy 5:8, we're told that a man who doesn't consider in advance, provide for his own, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That's a pretty sharp rebuke. When I got married and I looked at the bills and realized we've got to somehow find a way to pay this stuff. When we had a little boy come into our family, and now I've got to provide for that little boy, and Lord willing in March we'll have another addition. I cannot sit there at the end of the month and say, I know we need diapers, I know we need other things, but I really needed to go to the movies a lot this month, and I don't have it to give you. I know we need food for the baby. I know we need to be able to provide food even for ourselves, but there was this new gadget that came out, and I really needed that, and so I don't have any money to provide. Money is to support my family. And as the husband, the head of the house, the father, if I look at the end of the month and I have not budgeted properly, I am being materialistic in some fashion. Maybe it's going out to eat too much. Maybe it's buying too much stuff. But if I don't have the ability to provide what my family needs, the Bible tells me that I'm worse than an unbeliever. And that's not to be taken lightly. But we also find that money is to help those that are in need. Ephesians 4:28, Acts 2:44 through 45. The early Christians, the very first Christians that we read about in the New Testament, When they saw that their brethren had need, they sold what they needed to sell to give them what they needed. That's interesting. Back in that time, they didn't have a church treasury yet. They didn't have a budget that they could say, well, we have this much money left over. We can pull from that and give it to you. If someone said they needed something, it wouldn't be uncommon for someone to say, well, I've got a plot of land that I could sell, and that will give the amount of money that's needed. I don't need all this livestock. I don't need all of this clothing. I don't need all of my stuff. I can sell it if you need it, and I can get what you need to you. And that was what the first century Christians had an understanding about money, was that it wasn't just theirs. It was to help those that were in need. But we also find in the New Testament that it's to help spread the gospel. The proper use of money and the purpose of money is to try to get the gospel further. I don't have to explain this to you. You know that this congregation and this eldership that we are blessed to have are very involved in mission works and in spreading the gospel. They countless of times have done what they needed to do and what others needed from them to be able to help spread the gospel. And what a blessing it is to have an eldership and a congregation that is mission-oriented in their mindset, that wants the gospel to be spread to another person, to another part of the world. And that's what we find recorded in Matthew 28:18-20, was to go into all the world. Did Jesus somehow forget that that would require financial help? Was Jesus unaware that when He gave them the command to go everywhere that they would need money and places to live and things to eat and places and opportunities and transportation? No, Jesus knew that that was going to be a requirement, but He still gave the command to go. So we find it to be a very big purpose of money in helping to spread the gospel. But the number one thing that we need to remember is that there's really no true value or meaning to our lives added by having more money. And that's a tough one, because that's not what the world tells us. All the commercials that you see, if you want to be rich and famous, you should buy our product. If you want to be popular, you need to dress like this. You need to do this. You need to do that. Your whole style is just too old-fashioned at this point. You should just update your entire wardrobe, spend all your money at this store, and we'll get you ready to face the fashion trend of 2021 going into 2022. It's a lie. It's not true. Your life does not become better. If you wake up tomorrow and have $4.2 million in the bank, you don't suddenly become more wealthy from a spiritual perspective. And the old adage and old phrase is that money doesn't change who you are. It just reveals more of what you already are. You wonder why we see professional athletes that get their first big payday and then all of a sudden they seemingly go crazy? Just within the span of a year. Many times that athlete is no longer playing on that team that gave him that big contract because of the way that they started to act. But then the stories from the locker room and other professionals on the team, the other staff members, start to come out that show that wasn't really a surprise to them, because they saw it internally. But once he got his money, now we're seeing it externally. Money just makes me more of what I already am. The purpose of money is to remind myself that it's not about having more money. Now, we read in the Bible that the love of money is evil. Not the usage of money, not the possession of money, not even the desire to be financially secure. There's nothing sinful about wanting to wake up in the morning and know that your bills are paid. Know that you're not going to be in some type of financial struggle. We're told that the love of money is the issue. And as I think about facts that need to be reminded, it tells me in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, that we don't lay up treasures on earth. We're supposed to lay up our treasures in heaven. I can remember when my wife was in school and she had to do clinicals where she would go and have to work at a hospital all day. Sometimes she would come home, and I've done this too, by the way, but sometimes she would come home and maybe she forgot to take a pen out of one of her scrubs, and she threw it in the wash, and we opened up the dryer to find a lot of our clothes with ink stains all over them now. Sometimes if you catch it in time and you don't dry your clothing, you can fix it. You can use certain tricks and things to get that ink off, but sometimes it doesn't come off. And I learned scrubs are not cheap. Scrubs are expensive. Dress shirts are expensive. And it only takes a couple of loads of laundry where one of us had ruined the other's clothing for us to all of a sudden, before we put in a lot of the loads of laundry, to check to see if there's any pin or anything like that in there, because it's a valuable possession of ours that we need and we don't want ruined. My clothing is corruptible, though. That's the whole purpose of laying up treasures in heaven and not on earth. The things that I wear, the things that I own, don't last forever. Just for show of hands here, would you raise your hands for me if you've ever had to replace an appliance in your home? Would you raise your hands for me if you've ever had to? Oh, look at that. I thought that they made things with the intent purpose that they last forever. No, in fact, a lot of people say now that they make them worse than they used to make them to try to get you to buy them more often. Our stuff's not forever. And if I put my whole treasure in the things that I have, it's going to be corrupted. And I won't have the actual eternal treasure that I need. Our treasure should not be earthly. And we came into the world with nothing. We're not going to be leaving the world with more than we came with financially. We come into the world with nothing, and that's exactly how we go out. The school all the time will get calls about someone having dress shirts or suits, things that maybe a relative had that is passed on. Can we bring them up there for any of the students that might need them? And sometimes we'll say yes, sometimes we say, well, we really don't have any room for that right now. But the fact remains, those suits were once someone else's, but they've passed on and they didn't get to take it with them. The same will happen to me one day, and the same will happen to you. We come into the world with nothing, and that is exactly how we leave. Now, a reminder, what we put up there on the beginning of this slide needs to be repeated, because it's the loving of money that is sinful. But finally here we find that we need to be content with what God has given us. Children have a really hard time understanding this. When the pandemic happened and we would need to go to the grocery store, I would sometimes need to take Adam with me. And because toddlers are very hard to please, often I would find myself walking down the toy aisle just to get him to be quiet for a minute about asking me a bunch of questions and look at all the cool things that are on this aisle. But I also made a mistake, a rookie parent mistake. I often would buy him something. And I see the shaking of heads. I know now that's a bad idea, because the day came where we weren't really in a place where I was looking to buy him anything, and I intentionally avoided that aisle, and I got a talking to by a 3-year-old. Daddy, are we going to the toy aisle? I don't think so. Probably not today. Will you always buy me something? You need to buy me something. And in a Walmart, I'm walking around explaining to my 3-year-old, Daddy's probably not smart for having done that all this time. And I learned it even more when I would come home from a trip and I would bring him something. And I came home from a trip where I had been stranded in some place due to a flat tire, and I didn't really have the ability to go and get something. I came home and he said, "Where's my present?" I said, "It's where your good attitude is. It's not with you, apparently. You need to understand, I can't buy you something every time I go somewhere." But I realize I'm training my 4-year-old, my young child, to have the mindset that he is valued by the stuff that he has. And that he started to really not be content with what we had given him. He's focused on the next thing. But I've been the same way. I've found myself at times having that thought of, well, I have this, but this is the newer model. This has one more feature than what I have that I really don't need, but boy, it looks cool and I would really like to have it. And I've made bad decisions just for a feature that I didn't need. I woke up the day before having no need of it. And if I'm not careful, I will also be like that little toddler and not content with what is surrounding me and the blessings that God has given me. If we look at some examples tonight of good and bad uses of money, the people who valued God's way instead of valuing things, the first one that we would almost all come to mind is the Good Samaritan. Here's a man that gave of his own money to help someone else out. And not only what he had on him at the time, he said to that innkeeper, whatever extra you need to charge him, I'll settle when I come back through. That's not a small ask there. We wouldn't want to do that if we were driving through some drive-thru and someone said, sir, ma'am, your order's been paid for by the people in front of you. Have you ever had that happen where you say, well, okay, I'd like to pay for the people behind me. Okay, your total is $52.38. Okay, what about the people behind them? And you don't want to pay that amount because that's not what you were prepared to pay. If we're not careful, we're not willing to go the extra mile at times because we know we can't afford it. This Good Samaritan didn't even know what he might be charged. And he said, I'll settle it when I come back. What an impressive response that is. But we mentioned earlier for a moment that the early church was one to be known to give away their things. That's not just Acts 2:45 through 44 or 44 through 45. It's also Acts chapter 4, verses 34 through 37. If there was a need, that need was met to the best of the ability that they could do. And that really is how it should be today as well. Now, we're blessed to be able to have a church treasury, to be far above and advanced in the early days of the church where as far as finances are concerned. But I'd like to think that all of us here, if we found out someone needed a lunch paid for, that we wouldn't sit there and say, well, I already gave to the church this week. I can't cover your $8 meal. I would like to think that if we had it, we would give it. And I believe that's the case. To be as giving as possible because we've been blessed with so much. Early Christians were ones that found themselves giving as much as they were needed to give. And there was no complaining about that. It was almost as if it was just an understood, fact of Christianity to them. Well, you need it, I've got it, I don't need it, let me give it to you. But the ultimate example is Christ, who gave up the greatest wealth, being found in equality with God, according to Philippians chapter 2. And He gave that up. He made Himself a servant to come to this earth and to die. Jesus had the greatest wealth that He could have possessed, and He said, you know what? They need me more. I'll give it up to help save them. If you think about improper examples, Ananias and Sapphira are probably some of the more famous ones that come to mind because there wasn't really anything inherently sinful with the idea that they had, that they would keep back some of the money. In fact, the apostles told them that. You could have kept the money. While it was yours, it was in your control. The sin became when they acted like they were giving all that they could give. And they were making it appear that they were really burdening themselves with this type of gift. And they lost their lives because of it. And another famous example of one who sold our Lord for money was Judas. He valued the 30 pieces of silver so much that he was willing to kill a man for it. And even when he came to his senses and he tried to return it, I find it interesting that they say, we don't want that. That's of no value to us. That's the same amount of money that our Lord was just sold and killed for. And yet the people who paid that said, we don't want that back. No value to us in that. Now this last one here in our examples is Demas, and I want to point this out because we're told that Demas has forsaken Paul for his love of the present world. Now there's nothing in there that says it had to do with his love of money. But materialism can also be just our love for this life. It's not just financial. There are so many people who are spending so much of their time living as if they will never leave this earth. Whether they think that they're not going to die, whether they think that even after they die that they just stay here forever for some reason, so much of life is spent building up all of this wealth. And in so many cases, even at the expense of our loved ones, of our friends. And we look back at the end of our lives and realize this was vanity. You see, if we would realize what Solomon came to terms with in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 after he tried to get all of the possessions and all of the stuff for himself, and he gets to the end of that and he says, I looked at all that I had accomplished. It is worthless. It really didn't mean anything to me like I'd hoped it would. We had to pack our house up, and while we were doing that, I found things that I had convinced myself that I were going to use. I mentioned this to you all just a few months ago in a previous sermon, but I found stuff even more so now when I walk through a store and look at some of the items that are for sale, and I think, why would someone buy that? What benefit is that going to give to me? It's not really going to make my life better. I'm not talking about something like a Keurig, which might make your coffee faster in the morning. No, I'm talking about the little itty-bitty thing that you might strap around your coffee cup so that it's a little less hot when you hold it. We need that. There's nothing wrong with having that, but that's a necessity. Or even as I mentioned in that sermon just a few months ago, a Spider-Man ice cube tray, that's necessary for us to have in our world. That's what we really need. And I love Spider-Man. That thing makes no sense to me. I don't get why I would want to have Spider-Man shaped ice cubes. I don't know what that does for me. But then I see those ads for the new cars. Oh, they can get you. This car can almost drive itself. This car can go 300 plus miles on a single charge. Ooh, how much? I might be able to afford that. I could make payments on that, and I've got a good car, but this car will save me money here, even though I might be upside down after getting out of this car loan and getting into that one. I need that one because of what it offers, the features that it has. I love having good features on a vehicle. I love having safety features on a vehicle. There's nothing wrong with having that. But they say about technology and about cars especially, those two things depreciate in value so rapidly. Especially a new car. Drive it off the lot. Sorry. There you go. There's your value. Technology, you buy the latest, greatest phone, computer, tablet, TV, whatever, the next day, oh, the horror as you watch as they announce another TV that has even more. And you just bought this one. We become so enamored with the stuff. And I think it's possible that like Demas, we can find ourselves, even without being financially obligated, to be caught up in the world, to the point of being materialistic and saying that God isn't valuable to me anymore. As we think about materialism and the right mentality, the true right mentality is this: you don't own anything. I don't own anything. I won't forget, for as long as I can remember at least, one of the days in class where Brother Mosier says that famous line, "Gentlemen, take out your wallets." And those of them that have been in school for enough, they don't take their wallets out. Those new guys, they almost always reach back there and they pull their wallet out. And then the students that have been there just kind of wait because they know what's coming. You think that's your wallet? It's God's. And I remember being a first-year student going, "You got me. Wow. I had never thought about that before. It's not mine. It's God's. Because God owns it all anyway. There's nothing on this earth that has financial status and gain, whether it's money, whether it's things, whatever it is, that belongs to anyone other than God. Every good gift is from God. All of the things that are beneficial to me that are in my house, all of the things that I have in my bank account, whatever it might be, it all belongs to Him. I can't claim any of it. It might be in my name, but it's on loan to me. I may pay for years and finally get that piece of land with the house of my dreams, but I'll die. And if the world remains and I have passed on, that's it. Best I can do, best I can hope for is that it stays in my family. That's it. When we think about the creator of the universe, what all that took, Genesis 1:1, the very first verse of the Bible tells us who owns it all. But we also find in Psalm chapter 24 and verse 1 where it says the earth is the Lord's. Doesn't belong to anyone else, and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. I belong to Him. And if I look at my child and want to teach him the proper value of money and possessions and those things, by teaching him that, yes, it's okay to have fun. Yes, it's okay to go out to eat and to go to a movie that's appropriate to see, to go on a vacation, to do something for your family that will be beneficial. And sometimes it's okay to tell your family if you've saved up and you've done everything that you can to have a great vacation. Sometimes the family might say, get what you want to eat. There's no price limit tonight. There's nothing sinful in doing that every once in a while. But if my whole meaning of life, if my whole purpose of life is in doing that and trying to keep up with the people who have that type of money, to live a lifestyle that I don't have the ability to live because I don't have that money, I will wake up one day and find myself to be broke. Spiritually as well as physically. I can wake up and have so much money in the bank account, though, and still be broke spiritually. And it doesn't make any difference for me if I don't realize who's really in control and who owns it all anyway. I have been entrusted with wealth. So have you. And we're expected to be a good steward of that money. I can tell this story because my mom and dad aren't in here, and I've changed. But when I was about 9 or 10 years old, our school was having a Santa shop of some kind. And I went to my mom and dad and I said, Mom, Dad, I would like to buy gifts for the family. And I really intended to do that when we talked about it. And they might have been the ones to come to me, but the plan was this, as far as I know and remember. I was sent with money to purchase gifts for my family. I can vaguely remember walking around that little Santa shop and going, that looks really good for me. Put that in the cart. Boy, that looks like someone like me would really enjoy that, and put it in the cart. And I got to the end of my dollar, basically the last little bit of what I'd been given, and realized I had not bought a single thing for any of my relatives. And so I was like, well, this thing's 25 cents. That's got Dad's name written all over it. That's about 5 cents. That's got my mom's name written all over it. And I started to just try to penny pinch as best as I could with that last dollar that I had to my name. And I don't know what I thought was going to happen when I got home. But I remember being asked, what'd you get? I got a lot of stuff for me. And I got one thing for all of you. I learned a very hard lesson at that age, because all of those gifts that were for me went to what South Haven was doing at the time that was equivalent to a St. Jude's toy drive. And I had to be the one to put all those toys into that basket. You know how difficult that was? I'd bought all of that for me. But the point remained, I had not thought about the others in my family. I had thought only about myself. I'd not been a good steward of what I'd been given. And I'd like to say that that's the only time in my life where I ever have found myself to be more about myself financially than other people. That'd be a lie. There have been times where I could have maybe helped somebody with something. Maybe I could have gone the extra mile a little bit more, but I didn't. I was more focused on myself. Our collection plate giving that we do every first day of the week, because we're commanded to do it, is not the only giving that is required of being a Christian. But it bothers me in some places where I've been privileged to visit, and some of the attitudes of people that I've seen where that's kind of how they feel about it. Once you give your check, once you throw in that money, you're done giving for the rest of that week until the next Sunday. I can give of my time and still be giving back to God and being a good steward of what's been given to me. If I see somebody in need, if I know that a church member, maybe they're dealing with a hard time, they've lost their job, maybe something happened and they're not going to have a very good Christmas, I can scrounge up some money for them, can't I? And if you can't, that's understandable. There's no verse in the Bible that says, and if you can't do it, then you're in sin. But if I can and I don't, am I not being a little bit materialistic? Am I not putting all of that effort into my own? And I have to be careful to be a good steward of what's been given to me and to be faithful in that stewardship. Whether it's 1 talent, 5 talents, or 2 talents, I'm expected to go out and do what I can with it. And maybe it is just putting it in the bank and getting interest back on it. I'm told that that would have been better than burying it in the ground. I can't have it, it's all mine and it's no one else's, because I'm not going to live forever. It's a hard thought. I have things that I'd like to see, places I'd like to go, things I'd like to do. I'm not going to live forever. The only thing I take to eternity is my soul. Same with you. Same with me. And we need to focus on the spiritual blessings that actually last, those riches that are eternal. By way of closing, let me just say, if that we don't need, that in many cases provides no value to us simply because it's ours. But it's not. Thank y'all so much, and Lord willing, we'll be back for this